bring Elena Verna up to the stage. Elena runs the consumer business at Malwarebytes and formerly ran growth at SurveyMonkey for a very long time. So I'm happy to introduce Elena. Give her a round of applause. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Right. So Elena, why don't we start by just having you introduce Malwarebytes?
Sure. I started at Malwarebytes just a little bit a year and a half ago. I started running a growth team there. Malwarebytes, I should take a step back, is a cybersecurity company that cleans and remediates your device, and then are paid. It's a freemium offering. So cleaning is always free, but then if you want to protect your device from malware threats or any other cybersecurity issues that you might be having with your computer, then that protection is paid with subscription offering. So a couple of months ago, I started running entire consumer business. Malwarebytes is divided into consumer business and corporate business. So my charter is running consumer business, everything from marketing to design to product to all of the retention, billing, and monetization techniques.
Cool. So I'll ask you the same question that I asked at the beginning of this presentation. How does your product grow?
So Malwarebytes is very interesting, and it's very different from SurveyMonkey, where it was before. It's a consumer product, so it's a true B2C, where people are buying it for their personal devices. However, who knows what cybersecurity is? If I ask every single one of you a definition of what you should be afraid of or what you should be protecting yourself on your personal device, every one of you will have a completely different definition. And there's a lot of competitors out there, because there's Norton, there's McAfee, there's CrowdStrike, there's Sophos. So which product do you actually use, and which product do you actually believe will actually protect you, and you're not just going to waste your money on something that you don't understand if it actually works? Malwarebytes had an amazing history. It started when our founder and CEO was only 14 years old. He had Norton running on his home computer, and he got infected by playing a video game that he pirated off the internet. Now, he was afraid to tell his parents that he just infected his computer, even though he had an AV running on his computer, antivirus. So he went onto forums, and he spent hours and hours trying to figure out how to remove the strain of malware that would actually allow his computer to run normally. He met a few friends along the way in the forums, and they created this algorithm that would clean up your computer even if AV fails. So Malwarebytes came in as a second opinion scanner that would basically clean your computer when AV completely fails. And what happened is that all of the personas that are actually technical, so user personas that are technical, that actually understand what cybersecurity is, flocked immediately to Malwarebytes to understand that they actually will clean the computer. So people that know cybersecurity immediately recognize Malwarebytes. Now, that was over 14 years ago, and the product was in the free state as our CEO went to high school, and then he went to college. And after he graduated college, which was 5 years ago, he actually decided to make it a company. So it was a completely free viral growth of what we call a user persona now, home CTO, of that technical person, that technical friend that you know in your life that actually understand what is happening with your device. So product grew by word of mouth, because people that knew what product was doing appreciated the value that it was provided, and they recommended it to all of their friends that had issues, and they would come to them and say, I have a problem, help me fix it, I don't even know what to do. And they come out as a hero, because they fixed their friend's computer, they take care of their family's devices, and they kept them safe. And they used Malwarebytes as a tool to do so. So it made them look really good. So they doubled down on actually propagating that product through. So we've done a lot of the studies of our personas over the last year or so, and we basically figured out that home CTO is our main, say, viral persona that actually gets our product out there, because everybody else has no idea what we do. But they do, they recommend us, the other people trust them, and they look great. So that basically was our not compounding, but it was our first viral loop that actually took the company of where it is right now.
Cool. Yeah, we talk about this in the course, how there's both push and pull word of mouth. So, a push word of mouth is where I'm just dying to tell you about this new product because I think it's so great. Pull word of mouth is where people seek you out because you are an expert, and they're trying to get advice on something that's very important to them, like buying a home or getting their computer less infected. And both can be very strong levers of growth. It doesn't have to be this thing you're dying to tell everyone about. Like, you wouldn't think that antivirus software would grow via word of mouth, but it does because there are these experts. I know who it is in my friend group that I would go to if I had these problems, and those are the people you seek out in these moments. Great. So how did Malwarebytes think about this prior to when you got there? I mean, did they have a full understanding of how their loops operated? Did they have a growth model?
We didn't understand it up until a year ago. The company is just growing like weed. It's in high double digits, and everything was fine, and we just kind of went with it. And then after we ran our user personas, and after I actually understood our dependency on this home CTO, we started figuring out, OK, how do we actually compound additional viral loops when we run out of the pool of the home CTOs that will continue referring us? Because as well as the business is growing right now, in order to continue that high growth when the large number starts to come in and it's harder and harder to grow on your existing base, that's when we started introducing other loops in the product.
Right, makes sense. And I think it's surprising how common this is at companies. Like an example, from my career is, Reddit is a company that essentially started growing really fast, started growing, free virally, and they essentially had no idea why. So they just didn't touch the product for 10 years, and then they started, bringing in more professional managers, started actually modeling how the thing grows, and now they've done a redesign. They're actually asking people to sign up sometimes. They're figuring out what actually drives their loops and increasing the growth rate of the company in the process.
And the same with SurveyMonkey. So I started at SurveyMonkey back in 2009. The product was already 10 years old by then, but it had only 10 people working at it. And we had no idea why the product was growing as fast as it was growing. It took us probably 5 years as we started recording all of the data, all of the interactions with product, where we actually connected the pieces of where viral growth for SurveyMonkey comes from. And it wasn't word of mouth. It was, if I sent a survey to all of you, I actually acted as a marketing agent for SurveyMonkey, and now all of you exposed to that brand because you took the survey. I need you to take a survey to help me, but you now exposed to SurveyMonkey as a brand, and almost all of the signups at SurveyMonkey came from you as respondents to the survey that coming back to SurveyMonkey product after you create an intent. So it's always there, but put a finger on it, whether it's actually viral and trackable in the product, or whether it's a persona base that you can actually get via surveys to understand where it's coming from. That's basically the key.
Yeah. How many of you received a survey from SurveyMonkey or sent one in your career?
Right. SurveyMonkey paid $0 for that. And you all guys, basically, whoever sent it to you or where you took it from acted as a marketing agent on SurveyMonkey's behalf.
Yeah, so in the course, we call this a content loop, right, where people are sending content to you and you're getting exposed to the product. And what's genius about SurveyMonkey is if you're sending a survey out to 1,000 respondents, only one of them needs to eventually become a survey creator for that to be a sustainable loop. Eventbrite grows in a remarkably similar way. So I spend a lot of time at Eventbrite these days. And event creators create events. They distribute them to their fans. And a significant percentage of those fans end up creating events later. So it's a very sustainable content loop driven in almost the exact same way as SurveyMonkey, but in a very different type of business otherwise. It's very fascinating. Cool. So you mentioned that one of the changes that you worked on with Malwarebytes when it became a quote-unquote real company is a freemium business model. Can you talk about freemium's role? Because I don't think it's well understood, but I'm sure a lot of people are playing with those models and figuring out if it makes sense for them.
Yeah, both SurveyMonkey and Malwarebytes, which are the two companies that I worked for, are very heavy freemium-based products. Freemium is a little bit dangerous because it's a fantastic way to grow very naturally because you give no barriers to entry into your product and you monetize on some aha moments further down the flow. So there's no really decision that you need to make up front. But it's also a little bit dangerous because you give away a lot for free. In order for customers to engage with your product for free even, you have to provide a lot of value in your freemium business. Now, that drives a lot of acquisition, but it also drives fairly slow growth from the beginning of your paid subscriber base. Because you really need to build a brand and you need to build that freemium offering that is extremely lucrative and very compelling to your user base, and then you monetize maybe 5%. So as you understand, the top of the funnel has to be huge, and for that organically to grow, especially if you have a viral loop within your freemium, which is extremely powerful because that freemium will grow your acquisition on the other side, but then your paid is only 5%. So you're basically playing, again, law of large numbers. I will displace all of the competitors in my competitive set. I will have everybody running my free product. That is my seeding strategy. And then I work on monetizing them, and then you really, really, really focus on extreme value prop to those free users so they even have a desire to upgrade to your paid offering.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think what's confusing about freemium is, and you know, Brian Balfour's talked a bunch about this, freemium isn't an acquisition strategy.
Yep.
It is not a pricing strategy. You still have to figure out a pricing strategy for all those users eventually,
right.
Or you will eventually run out of venture capital or whatever is sustaining this. But it makes a lot of sense when driving top of the funnel growth is short-term more important than driving revenue growth.
Right, but if you don't have that viral loop with your free product, I wouldn't necessarily recommend engaging in the freemium business, just because otherwise you're just giving your product away for free. If you're giving it for free, make sure that you're getting it in return of that customer bringing other customers on board through some sort of loop.
Yeah, I think what we've seen with the most successful freemium businesses is not only are those free users creating more users in the long run, either virally or by creating a ton of content that gets consumed, but also they have a separate way to monetize that is very tightly packed with once the user is receiving enough value, they have that hook to get them in. And I think Sean will talk later about some of that from his experience. Cool. OK, just moving down. So we talked a bit about the micro loops of a Malwarebytes and a SurveyMonkey. There's kind of this word of mouth loop for Malwarebytes. There's this content loop for SurveyMonkey. Can you talk a bit about the macro loops? Like what network effects or economies of scale are powering these businesses, and how have you thought about those issues?
So at Malwarebytes, we're really working right now towards creating more of a compounding loops. The home CTO is fantastic, but we're kind of going one step further and understanding, OK, our product, we're working on educating general public in terms of what cybersecurity actually means so they understand what product they should be paying for. But that's a very, very long-term strategy, so they actually know why they should be buying us or somebody else. Now, at the same time, we're looking to see, OK, how else can we actually grow our user base? So we're going into a multi-device strategy. Instead of just covering one device, we're really trying to cover all of your devices and all of your family members if you actually do decide to buy. So I'm now only recommending, I'm now feeling that I'm protecting my family and friends, which as I'm a home CTO, feel empowered by, and our pricing strategy is very much inducive to buying additional devices. So first device is very high point of entry, and then each additional device is minimal compared to the first purchase. And then we're going after as well, removing all of the barriers for any other home CTOs that we have. So gamer mode. A lot of our home CTOs are playing games, so we want to create an application for those home CTOs that are actually inducive to the game playing and not disrupt the game experience. Then we're moving one step further and saying, OK, now we have a pretty large paid subscriber base. We're going to spend time on paid marketing and performance marketing. So now we're creating the paid loop to aid some of the acquisition efforts. And then we're going and saying, who else can be buying for the customers? So we're going and saying, parents will always buy for their children, and parents always worry about the cybersecurity of their children once they have the devices. So we're trying and attempting to go after that persona as well. So it's trying to rinse and repeat and to say, this is our core good. Now, how do we apply it to other personas? How do we apply it to other much bigger scale? And how do we maintain that growth?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about your example is, so you have this very core pull word of mouth loop that has targeted, that's basically infected a core persona like a virus would, and most of those people already aware are using Malwarebytes. But now you're like, can I recreate that in these new personas? And that unless those two groups interact, they won't.
Yep.
And you need to figure out how to kickstart this next word of mouth loop. And you might use performance marketing loop to drive initially and then see if you get the same word of mouth over time. So it's, again, like, can I use one loop to kind of make another loop possible is something that you should think about.
But the core is here, the product stays exactly the same. So the product is not really changing. It's just we're making few additional features and adjustments to really get appealing. But it's a product marketing challenge at that point, as opposed to trying to reinvent your product. But as we're at the same time going towards Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 on product development and strategy at the same time, as we go into the world of IoT and personal devices really migrate towards mobile space. So it's the parallel tracks of how do you still monetize your core offering while you develop all of the additional features and functionality that will basically sustain you 5 years from now.
Cool. Can you talk about, one of the things that I found fascinating with Malwarebytes is that you have it basically installed on so many machines across so many users, and just that alone has become a macro loop in terms of the data you're collecting. So can you talk a little bit about that and how that's played out?
Yeah, the freemium offering is so strong. In fact, we always hear from our customers that we give away too much. But as a result, it actually...
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it's a double-edged sword, because what it allowed us to do is spend $0 marketing dollars in the first 10 years of the product's life. And we are third most known brand in cybersecurity space, only behind Norton and McAfee, who have spent millions and millions and millions. So we got this brand awareness by having extremely strong free product. And that's basically our claim to fame, because we do we're taking an approach of, if you come to us with a problem, we will never turn you down and we will fix it for free. Because we want to be the good guys. We want to be your heroes. And then if you want to protect yourself, then it's a paid offering that actually only got introduced 4 years ago into the product. So this spiral loop and this huge spread allowed us to become a very strong competitor to these very large companies that are so heavy on investments and the dollars that they spend in the marketing and branding space. And we did it with 0 investment. Now, again, it took time and it took giving away too much for free. But now we're actually building up the paid feature set for the paid offering to be more and more compelling. But to me, do you want to grow really, really fast and potentially unsustainably? Versus Malwarebytes had a very slow growth ramped. It was very low at the beginning, and then it started accelerating. But that growth loop is extremely sustainable because it's completely self-funding, and we're not really investing much of the paid marketing into it.
Right. But you also have this thing where just by so many people are using it, you're able to detect things faster and faster and fix them faster and faster.
We're able to get much better intel on the entire space. That's absolutely right. We have millions, we have over 30 million endpoints devices that were installed and out there. And that's coming in and going. Those are active devices that are actually in our user base, which is a very large number, and allows us to really understand the threat landscape and create very compelling content marketing based on that. We can analyze the threats. The moment we see them light up globally, we can track them down. We even work with the FBI, try to get them all of the information possible of where we saw the first infected computer with any given strain of cybersecurity. So it gives us a competitive advantage of understanding the spread and understanding how these things hop between computers, and especially as we go into the corporate world, to really understand how on the corporate side, because most of the malware is targeting also corporate networks because they want to exploit the companies and get them ransomware payments. So we can track those very closely and be very fast at reacting and be very close to zero-hour protection algorithm that actually will protect you right as the malware is out there in the wild. So it gives us ability to understand the space a lot more. But again, very, very widespread, very small percent that we actually capitalize on. But even then, it's enough for us to be a multi-million-dollar company. Yeah.
So it's interesting in pairing the freemium strategy with the loops, and then thinking about potential growth loops in the future, it basically has strengthened the core product, right? Because they're going to detect things faster because they're on more devices. But then it sounds like going into corporate land, the chances are it's already on one of their devices, so it makes it much easier if you need to go through some sort of sales process.
Absolutely. It creates a land and expand strategy for corporate, because every single sales call starts with, how did you hear about Malwarebytes? Oh, I run you on my personal device. We don't need to spend a lot of money acquiring that lead. We already got them very affordable manner on our consumer business, and now we're just expanding them to bring us into the workplace, which is, again, a very sustainable corporate growth strategy, which is the same as Dropbox is doing, where you don't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars, especially in our case, we're going after that IT admin. We're going after that CISO, security admin. And those are people extremely rare and hard to find. So for us to spend on a lead, we'd be spending thousands of dollars, potentially 5, to just acquire that lead. Or we get them completely for free because they're already in our user base using consumer products. So it's a huge competitive advantage because we started with consumer offering first.
Yeah, I think one of the things when I start talking about loops, people are like, oh, that's cool. You work with a bunch of consumer companies. That's great. But like, I work at a B2B company. None of this stuff is going to work. And I think we've just seen a bunch of examples of these things work slightly differently, but they still work really well. Building data network effects, building viral loops, word of mouth loops, they are applicable in almost all businesses. Now, look, not every item available on the menu is going to work for every business, but you shouldn't kind of dismiss consumer tactics out of hand as being able to work for your business, because I think both SurveyMonkey and Malwarebytes are an example of leveraging it to something that's not typically thought of as consumer.
Well, yeah, SurveyMonkey, I mean, for the longest time, SurveyMonkey was considered a B2C product, but guess what? 90% of the usage is happening within B2B. Yes, we're working with Cs inside a B, but it's not a B2C, it's B2C to B. So it's different because there's more price sensitivity if you do have true B2C, but in the B2C to B, you actually have a huge ability to do basically exactly the same as you have in B2C, because you're working with direct consumers, but that potentially are working with an organization. And most of the SurveyMonkey use is completely, SurveyMonkey is for business, and that's how they've rebranded a couple of years ago to really establish that, because that was their seeding strategy as well. They're 99% penetrated into Fortune 1000 at this point. Again, spending nearly 0 marketing dollars into it. So now that they're in organizations, they're expanding to go to find that IT admin to consolidate the accounts. But that entry into organization, you can do very efficiently and land very profitably, and then just work on your expansion strategy, which is at the end of the day, mostly internally and operational, of how do you actually scale people and how do you provide some of the management components in the product. But it's a lot easier challenge to solve versus trying to hunt for leads out there and spending a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are certain models where finding the leads and doing the long-term sales loop does make sense. But I think what's been really fascinating about the last kind of 5 to 10 years is the explosion of companies targeting other companies without doing that, or pairing a sales strategy with something that looks more like a viral strategy or a content strategy. And that's something that obviously everyone should consider.
Absolutely.
I'd like to take a step back. You've worked with a lot of companies from early to late stage. You've seen a bunch of companies that have not had product market fit, had product market fit. How do you think about thinking about these loops versus product market fit? When is the appropriate time to start converting your thinking to this sort of approach? So
I think there's a lot of successful products that don't know where their acquisition is coming from. And if I had to say, more usually than not, they don't understand it until they're starting to try to get their shit together to potentially go IPO, to go get acquired, because then they do need to understand. Right. They do need to actually explain it to investors. I think it's okay not to focus too much on your viral loop. You do need to focus on your acquisition. The earlier you understand where it's coming from, the more scalable and sustainable and predictable it will be. So you're not going to be just at the whims of, did somebody refer you or not? You don't know who's referring you, and you don't know who to build that product for. Yep. We, for example, at Malwarebytes, we finally understood home CTO. That's our persona. That's who we're building product for. But our product is for mass market, because that home CTO is going to enable everybody else. But we maintain that ability for them to understand exactly what's happening in our product, so they would continue recommending us. So the earlier you understand is better, but I think achieving the product market fit is of utmost utmost importance before you start compounding your viral loops. Just find somebody who will actually use it, understand what they need, get that product market fit, then just go into the growth mindset. Because before that, you just need to land, and you need to land, and you need to get usage, and you need to get feedback of your product. After you have a successful product that is actually being used, then try to figure out how to actually accelerate it. But if you start doing it too early and you forget about product features and you don't finish building your product that is actually extremely usable for the customers, then you might be solving problem a little bit too fast, and you're not going to get that viral component moving fast enough.
Right, yeah, I agree. I think we've all seen examples of companies that grow virally very quickly, and then a year later, they're kind of out of business because they didn't have that retention. And I think of mainly the thing you're screening for with product market fit is that retention component. Of course, at some point, you need to be able to monetize it.
Yep.
And then if you have retention and monetization, you can say, OK, do those two allow me to build a sustainable acquisition loop or stronger retention loops over time? And trying to do acquisition loops before you have retention is basically a recipe for what we call the shark fin.
Yeah. And plus, a lot of companies also ask, when do you have to start building growth teams and so on? And that's where you really just, your entire company is a growth team at that point. You just land that product, make it that it's actually retainable. You don't want to focus on retention too much too early. A lot of them say, we're in acquisition mode. We just need to get new customers. We're not thinking about retention. But if you have a leaky bucket situation because their product is not sticky, you'll just be spinning wheels faster and faster than you can actually retain customers. So you have to keep a very tight focus on continuous feature development as long in parallel run with your acquisition viral loop strategy and growth tactics.
Cool. I want to dig into a little bit more of the kind of day-to-day tactics. So you come into Malwarebytes day one. You're like, oh, they can actually tell me how the product grows. I need to figure that out. What do you do? Like, what's the process you use to figure out exactly how it's working, figure out what the growth model is? How do you get the entire company bought into it? I imagine it doesn't happen overnight. So if you could kind of place those steps for us.
So most of the companies, when they start off, the only metric that they have a success of that they're looking at is their bookings. So maybe some daily active users. But that's an output metric. That is what happened after something else happened further down the funnel. So the first step to me, and when I joined Malwarebytes, is understand what is my acquisition metric, what is my engagement metric, what is my retention metric. Because how many new installs are we driving? How many new paid subscribers are we driving? What is the activation point? It's to run a scan, because that's your aha moment, because you ran a scan and you see results, and 60% of the scans find some sort of malicious strain in your computer. That's the aha moment. Then you upgrade. It is very scary. But then that's when you actually upgrade and say, OK, I don't want this to happen again. What's your first term churn? What's your second term churn? And that took us probably 4 to 5 months to actually get the data, get it scrubbed, cleaned, analyzed, put it through ETL, and put it out in the dashboard so we can track those metrics. And then we said, the biggest opportunity for us is not retention at the moment, although we have a lot of low-hanging fruit that we're going to go after and fix on retention, but our users retain pretty well because we don't need to create an event of aha moment for them. Marketplace does so. So we just need to run on their computer, and engagement events continue happening on their own as long as they're online, which everybody is online. So we don't need to work on now. We just need to make sure that the payment experience is very clean and that they utilize their license. But what we do need to focus is how to continue accelerating acquisition. And that's basically, that was step number one. We knew acquisition is what we needed to focus on. Step number two, say, OK, where is our existing acquisition coming from? We get thousands and thousands and thousands downloads every single day. What's happening? Where are they downloading from? Are they coming from our website? Are they coming from affiliate partners? Is somebody else hosting our download bit, and that's where it's coming from? So we went into attribution, and we're trying to figure out where it is. In the meantime, we started running surveys against our user base. Who are you? What are you doing? How did you find out about us? What do you use us for? How did you, are you using any other antivirus products? And that's how we started narrowing down to our persona, where it was a big aha moment for us. Oh, home CTO is our main persona that is actually driving purchasing behavior. The second paid persona was the one that they recommended Malwarebytes to, that also paid just blindly, that they don't know anything about cybersecurity. Somebody else told them to buy. And then the third persona was just using it still as a second opinion scanner. So they were using it in conjunction with other AV, but they weren't ready to switch to us, but they would still recommend us because they thought that their the double running us alongside with somebody else provides them most protection, and they're really in the mindset of 10 years ago what our product was actually doing then, and we haven't switched their perception yet that we can replace their AV. So then we had a very clear tactic. We need to show ourselves as an AV replacement. We need to double down on the home CTO. We need to find other personas that will be willing to buy for somebody else or recommend to somebody else, aka parents, because that's another buyer that will be willing to pay for us. And then 3, to just make sure that our home CTO is happy. Because if that's who we're actually building for, we're not building for me or you, we're building for that technical friend. So that basically became our motto in-house of this. Will home CTO be happy with our product, with every change that we're making? And then we started thinking about Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 features to say, how can we appeal to this home CTO? How can we create more products on more devices that they can deploy? How can we provide continuous value to them so they stick with us? Because we don't want to be one and done. We want them to not only protect their entire family and friends, but then we want them to take us to their place of business and create that groundswell in their place of business with an IT admin saying, hey, now you should be buying Malwarebytes in your place of business, as opposed to just on the personal front. So, but it took a lot of surveys, it took a lot of data analysis. We're still nowhere close to being done. We have at least the first stab of who those people are, but we're even continuously evolving it, and we're checking it at this point every single year to say, could we introduce another persona? Is there another cluster of use cases that is happening that we don't have a good understanding of? And how do these people think about the life journey with Malwarebytes? Where do they come from? What is their most relevant acquisition channel? How do they use it? How do they think about the value going forward? So it's marrying that qualitative and quantitative data is extremely important. I like to start with quantitative, just to clearly understand where opportunity for the business is, so we can focus, and then layer in the qualitative data to understand why it's happening, what's happening, and then come up with a strategy afterwards.
Cool. And how long did this process take?
It's ongoing. I mean,
so you've been working for over a year?
A year and a half. It's still ongoing. We had all of our quantitative data was probably done within the first 3 to 4 months. Qualitative data was finished within it took additional 3 to 4 months to get all of the qualitative research done, because it's not just running surveys, it's understanding what those surveys are saying. So you need to run clustering analysis on it, you need to do user interviews. It's a long process. But after that, we could actually come out and say, this is our strategy. We need to move into mobile, we need to move into corporate, we need to find another persona that can start recommending us. So we can start putting the rocks of who would say in the business and say, this is our focus, because this is where the next level growth is going to come from next year.
Yeah, so I think some interesting takeaways there is like, A, this doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. Like, you've been working on it for a year and a half. I'd say modeling out the new growth loops of Pinterest probably took 2 years until we had it really refined and knew every in and out of how it was working. This combination of talking to users, looking at data, surveying users, I hear time and time again, and certainly rings true from the Grubhub and Pinterest days of, basically the #1 question I usually end up having to ask when I talk to new companies when I'm thinking about advising them is like, okay, well, where are your new users coming from? And they're like, well, blah, 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 and then direct or organic. And I'm like, well, what's driving the organic? And they're like, we don't know. And it's like, well, have you surveyed them? And they're like, no. It's like, why aren't you serving them? That's like the easiest possible thing to do. You basically are going to pair these off each other, right? Like, you're going to talk to a bunch of users, you're going to learn some things, you're going to survey to see if they represent the broader base, you're then going to look at the data to see how the people that match those things match to value as a customer or retention, and this helps imply your strategy. So if you have a siloed user research organization or analytics organization or marketing or product organization, becomes a lot harder to do those things.
Yeah, I mean, and quantitative data is extremely important, but that will just tell you what is happening in your business. For you to form a strategy, you need to talk to your customers. If you're not talking to the customers, you're forming strategy for yourself, not for your business, and not for the people that are actually using your product. But for some reason, it's so easy to avoid that qualitative research and think of okay, this is what I think needs to happen, without having that customer's voice in the room to validate your assumptions. And even if you going against your customer's voice. At least then you know that you're going against customer's voice, and you need to understand that as a data point so you can make right decisions along the way, because you think you need to take a leap of faith to get your second horizon of the product market fit or whatnot. But understand that first before making any strategic decisions, because otherwise you might be diverging completely away from their aha moment for why they're using you. And without that why, you can't run a successful business.
Yeah. A last question. SurveyMonkey, you were there for almost a decade, I believe.
8 years.
8 years, yeah. Recently IPO'd. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Was it a similar time frame to kind of figure things out at SurveyMonkey? Did it take longer, shorter? Was there any changes in the process versus Malwarebytes or things you learned?
I think at SurveyMonkey, we knew SurveyMonkey. The benefit, the advantage of SurveyMonkey is that it was already a survey platform. It was in the DNA of every single person that we've hired that surveys is something they understood, and they understood the importance of surveying customers. And we had a perfect platform to actually integrate into our own product to get very detailed data from our customers and have it flowing through all of our systems. I would say at SurveyMonkey, we probably, because of the vast majority of data, so I joined it 8 years ago when it was only 10 people, but it was 10 years worth of data that was very cleanly aggregated by the best DBA that I've ever known and worked with to date. But it was all on shelves, so all we did probably for the first 3 years is just mine that quantitative data, just because it had so much insight into it. And we understood how people are interacting with the platform, what features are they using, what's working, what's not. So most of the product roadmap at the beginning was driven actually by quantitative data, because we saw either some feature just never got any exposure and didn't get used, but we knew that it was needed for the customers based on just the market space and what was expected from the platform, or there were some just huge drop-offs in some of the funnels, which just were issues with infrastructure that didn't necessarily work. So that fed us good for the first 3 years, and then we went very heavily into qualitative research. And qualitative research about user persona also happened much later at the point. It probably happened within the last 3 years that I was there, where we actually put the names and faces and says, this is our user. And then we started going and actually creating marketing materials for that. The big different with SurveyMonkey, it never had a really strong marketing team up until probably last 5 years that I was there, because it didn't need marketing. All of it's happening within the product viral loop, and that was its marketing team. The users were the marketing team. So we did focus on optimizing that viral loop for the most part at the beginning, and then we went into that process. But then you're at $150 million, you're growing at over 20% year over year, and for the first time, you know your user persona. And that's okay. Pick your battles, pick your focus, but it happens farther along the journey that you might think, and I wouldn't focus on it too early, because you might still be developing your user persona, so you don't want to narrow it down almost too fast unless you truly have the good spread and good usage of your product.
Yeah, I'd say both Grubhub and Pinterest were very similar, where it was kind of analyze the usage data first, then once you're getting the limitations of that user data, you start talking to users, you start surveying, and you build this more holistic view that is represented in a persona.
And the other thing that I just started doing is we've implemented sales chat on our site, and I just started talking to people. And after I started talking to people and they're confused with our site, I'm like, oh my God, this is what we need to do. Why do these people constantly have these questions over and over? But that connection with customer, I think, for me was missing for the longest time, both at SurveyMonkey and Malwarebytes. And once I got connected to the customer, that's when it actually starts bringing the qualitative analysis to you. And it's not as sexy because there's not as many data points, but it's so important in the verbatims that you get there that you started feeling their pain and you're starting to resonate with them, and then it makes you a better thinker about the product. And the last thing is just using product yourself all the time. I think that's of utmost importance, because if you don't get up every single week and use your product at least once a week, why would you ever ask your customers to do so? So marrying it that you in deep with it, you listening to your customers, and you understanding all of the quantitative loops that are happening within your product is of utmost importance.
Great. Well, I think we're out of time. Thanks so much, Elena, for coming.
Thank you, Casey.